The in-laws. Part 6. Amora refused to step out of the house for months. She could not even stroll around the village due to fear. All her prayers were to give birth safely and return back to Nigerian and face the Okosans squarely. The worry of not knowing how her mother and brothers were doing made her blood pressure high for months. She was thinking of leaving her child with the old lady when she gives birth. Amora's mother went to see Pastor Okeke, but he refused to see her. After several visits, she found out that he was also avoiding her. She did the unthinkable. She stood up in the church during service and started screaming, "Pastor Okeke sold my daughter. He sold my daughter to the wealthy Okosan family. I have not seen or heard from my daughter for months now, and they have refused to tell me anything." She was still shouting when the church's security men bundled her outside. Everyone was surprised and they all turned to Pastor Okeke for explanations. Pastor Okeke simply laughed and said, "Let us remember our sister, Mrs. Ogu, in prayers. Her daughter called me recently to inform me that she was diagnosed with mental illness. You know, being alone as a widow takes a toll on some women." "You mean the daughter she was claiming she have not spoken to?" a woman asked from the congregation. "Yes, you can imagine," Pastor Okeke responded while shaking his head. The entire congregation started buzzing with different narrative. "No wonder I saw her crying on the road and talking to herself the other day," one woman said and started calling God on her behalf. "I even saw her with her daughter yesterday, and she is saying she have not seen her for months. Mental illness is not easy to deal with," another woman said and started crying. "I think we need to pay her a visit to know how she is faring," one of the women suggested. They all agreed to visit her the next day. Once the service was over, Pastor Okeke received a call from Uncle Babs. "Take care of that little drama in your church before it gets out. We have bigger issues at hand. I wouldn't want your own to be added to the list," Uncle Babs commanded. Very early in the morning the following day, Pastor Okeke sent 3 of his men to Amora's mother. "When you get there, hold her down, inject her with this substance and leave immediately. Make sure no one sees you," Pastor Okeke instructed his men. When the women from Pastor Okeke's church got to Amora's mother's house later in the evening of the same day, they knocked and got no response. Then they pushed the door open and started walking around the house, calling out Amora's mother. They got to her room and saw her lying on the bed with tears trickling down her face. She has been paralyzed. Apparently the drug they injected her with caused her to have a stroke. She was just shedding tears and cannot say a word. The women cried out for help and Amora's mother was rushed to the hospital. The doctor's diagnosis was full stroke. The women contacted Pastor Okeke, who came and prayed for her and promised to clear her hospital bill. The whole church was singing his praises for being a pastor to the needy and the less privileged. And none of them thought of contacting her children. Amora's brothers were not only deported, they were accused of a serious crime and locked up in prison. The Okosans made sure that anyone who will ask of Amora's whereabouts is taken out of the way. Uncle Babs was becoming increasingly restless. They have contacted every hospital in Ghana to know if Amora registered with them for antenatal care. But none of the hospitals had seen any pregnant woman matching her description. She will be giving birth anytime within this week, and finding her before she gives birth is very important. How can she disappear like this? There is something that should be done when the child is born, to begin with. But even if I am not there to carry out this simple ritual, then we must find this baby and give him to Fora at 1 year. And that is if Fora do not choose him," Uncle Babs said, pacing about angrily. Amora was crying in her room as the midwife was telling her to push. "The baby is almost out, just try a little longer." The midwife kept encouraging Amora. Just then the baby came out. But something was wrong. He came out, cried a little and died. The old lady that Amora was living with carried him, but she found out he was already cold. The midwife and the old lady were just looking at each other. Then Amora asked, "What is wrong? Is my baby okay?" she asked, trying to get up. "No, don't get up yet. You need to rest," the midwife commanded Amora. "We don't know if anything is wrong yet. We need to watch your son first," she lied to Amora. Just sleep, you will need your strength, she convinced Amora to sleep. She took the baby outside and he was already white and strong. He was long dead. What do we do? How do I tell this poor girl that she have just lost her child? The old lady wept bitterly. She must know immediately, so that the baby can be buried, the midwife advised the old lady. Amora, who have been eavesdropping in their conversation, started wailing. Give me my child, he cannot die like this. After all I have been through. He can't leave me. She cried and carried her baby. Something is odd, how can he be this strong like a stone and he just died? He cried a little when he came out, how can he become this white and strong like a stone, just within 2 hours? The midwife also started observing what Amora was saying. You are right, Amora, the midwife said. How come he has green veins and very long nails? The old lady also made her own observation. Bury this child now, you are even lucky to be alive, the midwife said with fear. They started preparations to bury him. Amora cried until she became tired of crying. The midwife helped them to dig a little grave. They wrapped him in a white shawl and left him on the bed. When they were ready to bury him, the old lady prayed and told the midwife to bring him and place him in the grave. But Amora insisted on doing it herself. Immediately she got closer to him to pick him up, he started crying. They were all scared to hold him. Except the old lady, she took the baby and opened the shawl. Behold, the baby was full of life. Amora was skeptical to hold him. Take your child and feed him, the old lady commanded Amora. She took him and started breastfeeding him. The midwife later left after checking the baby and confirming he was okay. Amora was rejoicing that God came through for her, but the old lady thought otherwise, even though she never said anything. He has been born and Fora have chosen him. Uncle Babs said, falling on his knees crying. But is choosing him the worst thing? I thought you are concerned about how it will affect the Okosans, Auntie Moki asked with deep concern. This means that this boy will begin another lineage, different from ours. And we the Okosans will be wiped off. And he is now indestructible. Even if we find him, he cannot be sacrificed to Fora again. This means we are doomed. Another thing is, when Fora chooses a priest, a ritual must be performed at the birth of the priest to avoid the chosen one becoming a living demon. My father was a priest of Fora. When I was born, Fora chose me. My father performed a ritual ushering me into the Fora priesthood by naming me Okosan. So I began another lineage, and my father and his lineage all turned into stone. This happened because my father fell in love with my mother. No Fora priest falls in love, his emotions made Fora to choose me. In this case, our failure to secure Fora's sacrifice has made him to choose another priest. And this time around, he will be a demon. The only little hope and solution is, if we can find him before he clocks 1. We can bury him alive in Fora's shrine, to see if Fora can be appeased. If Fora accepts him like that, then we can all be alive and our lineage will continue to flourish. If not, we will all turn to stone and the child will cause havoc to humankind. Meanwhile, Amora and the old lady were busy planning Ifechi's baptism. Amora named him Ifechi, which means light of God.